Okay, so you know what I don't fucking understand? This is why I don't understand. See this? See this? See this? This is worth $50. This is worth $5. This is the exact same piece of fucking plastic. This is the same thing. We made up these arbitrary numbers. And then we said, we can't print more or else it'll be worthless. How about just don't let it be worthless? How about just don't tell anybody? Or just like, don't let it happen. We literally made this up. This is a construct we made up. Just don't let it inflate. Just don't. Like, people, I get inflate, but I don't. Like, just don't let it, fuck. You let this happen. You let this happen. How about you just let everything else happen too? Why don't you just let stuff not inflate? Like, just deflate.
So a quick overview of what this video will address. 4 questions will be asked. The first is, can we just decide to not let the dollar inflate in response to the issuance of stimulus checks? And the answer is going to be, well, not really. The second question is, are there other ways to issue stimulus checks without inflation? And third is the value of currency truly arbitrary? And 4, what about gold? Can we just decide to not let the dollar inflate? Suppose Congress says, let's go full ham. Let's give every American $10 billion. We're not going to worry about where the $10 billion comes from because that is a separate issue. Let us assume that everyone decides that the dollar should not inflate. This means that no one will raise prices post-stimulus. Consider the following, which we shall label Scenario A. Customer A goes to a grocery store high off the stimulus. He decides to buy the entire inventory of the store, and here are some reasons why. Since everyone can seemingly afford to buy everything, it might be in your interest to capture the inventory of the store before it's completely bought out. And since you can afford to buy everything and you can always turn around and sell the stuff you don't need, why not just buy everything? So again, he decides to buy the entire inventory of the store. And we will see later whether he decides to buy the entire inventory of the store or whether he just simply decides to buy more than usual does not affect the problem. Because the grocer has decided to not let it inflate, he sells the entire inventory at pre-stimulus prices. He ignores the incentive to maximize profits by raising the prices on his groceries. This is a resource allocation problem. Suppose that you're a customer B, C, or D. You are now holding a stimulus check that can no longer buy groceries from the grocer because the groceries just aren't there. Now this scenario A, is actually highly unlikely to sustain in the absence of government intervention. Even if it occurs, it may result in worse outcomes than inflation. Why is it unlikely? Well, humans are motivated by profit. I mean, that's a simple fact of human action. We do things because we expect to benefit from them. Scenario A is dependent not only on the grocer rejecting the profit incentive, but everybody rejecting the profit incentive. If customer A does not reject profit incentives, then he will mark up the prices and resell his groceries. This is inflation. If customer A does reject profit incentive, then he might resell his groceries at the same price that he bought them to customer B, who may or may not reject profit incentives, and so on and so forth. In order for prices not to rise, this requires everyone to reject profit incentives. The only way to avoid the need for a profit incentive is if the government institutes price controls, where this will again lead us to the inevitable resource allocation problems. Resource allocation problems, that is unprofitability, are unsustainable, because the exact same mechanism will apply to higher level factors of production as it will apply to groceries. Construction companies might find themselves unable to purchase nails, because those have already been bought by the first people to use their stimulus checks. Production of anything will be crippled in such an environment with this many resource allocation problems.
Don't let it inflate. Just don't.
This is what is likely to happen instead, which we shall call Scenario B. The grocer, seeking to make a profit, realizes a glut of demand and multiplies the prices of the groceries by 1 million. This is inflation. Situations in which people buy out the entire store become unlikely. Thus, the store's normal clientele are now capable of buying groceries with their stimulus money. The resource allocation problem has been diminished. However, inflation has occurred. So Scenario B is highly likely, and it creates inflation. So the answer to the original question, can we just decide to not let the dollar inflate? This is highly unlikely. It is highly unlikely that people can just decide to make the dollar not inflate, and even if they did so, they would create other problems. Now let's look at some potential responses, which will help us understand the matter better. One objection to this might be raised. One person might not buy up the entire store. People might be buying more than they usually do, but it could be multiple people. And this is technically correct, but it doesn't address the central problem. While the incentives are there to buy out the entire store, incentives are not a guarantee. However, this does not alter the central problem, which is resource allocation. The fundamental issue is that rather than distributing groceries to the people who would normally buy them, the groceries will very easily go to the first people who arrive at the store waving their stimulus check, or the first people who talk to a previous buyer. The problem doesn't really change whether one person buys out the entire store or 40 people buy out the entire store. The groceries could be distributed among more people, but you have destroyed the mechanism that ensures that groceries get to the people who want or need them the most. The family that was not able to get to the grocery frenzy in time, that is before all the groceries were distributed to people who are going to hold them, will have to go hungry. Now another question might be raised. Does this mean that inflation is a preferable outcome? No. Inflation is preferable to a complete collapse of profit incentives and resource allocation, but no inflation is even more preferable. Inflation introduces other issues which are in and of themselves resource allocation problems. Here's a quick overview. I'm not going to go into complete detail because that's not the subject here. Inflation disincentivizes saving, meaning that people have fewer funds to draw on in a crisis. Furthermore, it disproportionately incentivizes borrowing, meaning that capital piles into risky high-yield investments as people try to escape inflation. Hyperinflation occurs when people lose confidence in the money to such an extent that they will do anything to get rid of it in exchange for other goods which can be used in production or exchange for other goods. Are there other ways to issue stimulus checks without inflation? Yes, but you can't have your cake and eat it too. What can you do? One thing, the second you get your stimulus check, shove it in your mattress and do nothing with it forever. Pretend it doesn't even exist. Not only does this require everybody to do the same thing, but it also defeats the purpose of issuing a stimulus check. We could also tax people to pay for the stimulus check. But this is a 2-year-old sleight of hand, and it is so obviously stupid that even the government wouldn't do it. Is the value of currency truly arbitrary? Gold bugs will say yes, because the currency isn't backed by a physical commodity. But if the value of currency were truly arbitrary, what is preventing you from taking a single dollar bill, walking down to the grocery store today, and asking the manager to buy out the entire store with your single dollar bill? Why not, if the value of money is supposed to be entirely arbitrary? Currency, just like every other good, has value, simply because people recognize it has value in the context of exchange. People recognize that it has a particular value with respect to other goods. That particular value of money is captured in the prices of the goods that you can purchase with it. If I can buy a loaf of bread for $2, then the value of $1 is half a loaf of bread. That is what we mean when we refer to the purchasing power of money. If you believe that there is some objective measure of value for a good, that is, if you, like our TikToker, think that a $50 bill should be worth the same as a $5 bill because they are both just pieces of plastic, then you are committing a fallacy that many economists and socialists have since the dawn of mankind. Many people have tried to establish an objective basis for prices, and all have failed, such as the labor theory of value or the cost of production theory of value. It is not within the scope of this video to illustrate why these theories are wrong. I do have some articles here explaining why. Now, if you're anything like most conservatives and you haven't clicked away yet, you're probably screaming at your screen now. What about gold? Well, the benefit that a gold backing provides is not so much that it pegs money to something that has concrete value, to which I would ask the question, where does the value of gold originate? The benefit of a gold backing is that it discourages the government, or a central bank, or a regular bank from creating money arbitrarily. That is, more money than the issuer has reserves to exchange for. We have to understand that money isn't really supposed to be a stable measuring stick of value. It is valued in itself. Prices change all the time, irrespective of the backing of a currency. If anything, we would like to buy more with our money over time. We would like to have deflation, contrary to central bankers' wishes. That is the short explanation. Anyways, everybody should remember to take your vaccine and wear your face diapers.